Today's episode is sponsored by Midwest Fire. For more than 20 years, Midwest Fire has been manufacturing high-quality tankers, tanker pumpers, and fire rescue vehicles in the United States and Canada. Keeping firefighters safe while enhancing their capabilities is what they do best. To learn more, go to MidwestFire.com.
We can dance, everybody look at your hands. We can dance, everybody's taking the chance. Safe to dance, oh it's safe to dance. Yes, it's safe to dance.
Hello and welcome to episode 238 of the Situational Awareness Matters show. I'm your host, Rich Gassaway. The purpose of this program is to help improve situational awareness and high-risk decision-making for individuals and teams who work in high-stress, high-consequence, time-compressed environments with changing conditions. The SA Matters mission is simple. We want to help you see the bad things coming and time to avoid bad outcomes. I'm coming to you today from my home office in St. Paul, Minnesota, having just returned from delivering two programs, a full-day situational awareness program for the University Heights Fire Department in Ohio, and a keynote address on how we make better decisions for the International Association of Fire Chiefs Volunteer and Combination Officer Section Symposium in the Sun in Clearwater Beach, Florida. Today's feature segment is a continuation of a series of flashback episodes I'm running from the early days of the SA Matters show. When I first launched this show back in 2014, I had some amazing guests who shared some incredible near-miss stories. The problem is, the show was new, really new, and I had not yet gained much of a followership. Well, not at least like the followership we have today. So I want to give the listeners and the viewers of this show who weren't with us back then an opportunity to learn from some of those powerful stories. Now, for those of you who are watching this episode on our SA Matters TV channel, the interview coming up is audio only segment because we weren't recording video interviews with our guests back then. So everything leading up to and following the interview will be video. Before I jump into the feature segment, though, I want to make another mention of a special I'm offering on enrollment for the SA Matters Online Academy. First responders, most, have received little or no training on situational awareness and high-risk decision-making. And this might be funny if it weren't so tragic. Did you know that issues related to situational awareness and flawed decision-making are leading contributing factors in near-miss and casualty reports? And many times the issues that lead up to the casualty might have been avoided if only the responder or responders had developed or maintained better situational awareness. I am on a quest to fix this problem. I really want to help improve your safety and your decision making, and I really want to help you go home from every call to the ones who love you. And I hope, with all my being, that you want the same thing. If you do, then let me help you. I've put together an incredible offer for fire departments. Until November 30th, a department can enroll up to 100 of their members for $29.99. Let me give you some perspective on how good a deal that is. The regular tuition for the academy is $199 a person. Even if your department enrolled less than 100 members, it's still a great bargain. To learn more, visit samatters.com website and click on the green box on the right side of the homepage labeled Online Academy. If you want to enroll or maybe just have some questions, then send me an email at support@richgassaway.com or just give me a call in our office, 612-548-4424. As a friendly reminder, this special offer will end November 30th. All right, let's jump into our feature segment, a flashback to my interview with Brooklyn Park Fire Chief Ken Prillaman, who at the time of this interview was serving at as the fire chief from Brooklyn Park, and he has since left Brooklyn Park Fire Department. Ken is going to share a story of a routine EMS call that, thanks to complacency and a few other factors, almost turned deadly for his crew.
On Saturday, September the 13th, the Brooklyn Park Fire Department was dispatched to what turned out to be a pretty significant automobile accident on one of the freeways that traverses our city. Our staffing on a Saturday at 11 o'clock p.m. is 3 two-person crews, 2 in a rescue, 1 as a dedicated engine company, and then a shift commander. I was serving as a shift commander.
Now, they're in 3 different stations, right, Ken?
They're in 3 different stations.
Okay.
And on an auto accident, at a minimum, we'd get 2 stations and a shift commander. So an initial response to that was 5. And based on updates from dispatch, we had the second rescue go en route to assist us. We had a pretty good wreck. While we were on that scene, we got dispatched for a subsequent call, a medical, which initially came in as a possible stroke. The reporting party indicated that his brother was having a stroke. And we were on kind of the downhill side of the wreck. We were kind of mopping up and felt like we could easily release a rescue. And we dispatched Rescue 31 from the scene of our accident down about 20 blocks south and a few blocks east of where the accident was located. Jeff and his crew took the call and went en route to that medical.
Okay. So that's crew 2 or 3?
Crew 2.
Crew 2. All right.
Correct. As Chief said, we were released. We went en route to the stroke call. We were updated en route that the patient was unconscious. When we arrived on scene, our 2-person crew, there were 2 police officers as we made entry into the front door. Saw a patient laying on the floor, had some blue markings kind of on his face, light blue, nothing that was like he's cold or anything like that, but just it didn't make sense. It's like, why is he blue?
When you say markings on the face, like, that look like he'd been hit?
No.
No,
just light blueness around the lips.
Okay.
Just it wasn't the normal pinkness, if you will.
Okay.
It wasn't normal coloring for anyone's. That's the first thing I noticed and that he had decorticate posturing. Arms were in, fingers were aligned towards the chest, and he was tight, along with this a smell of exhaust. And that was, as we talked about, that's the first thing that made the hair on my neck rise, was that smell and seeing this patient right inside the front door. At that point, we just said, let's go. We're just picking up the patient. We're going outside. We had North Memorial Medical on the way for our paramedic ALS unit. We made egress to the front yard, along with our 2 police officers that had been inside. And to the best of my recollection, at that point, North was there. We placed patient number 1 onto their cot, immediately put him on board. The brother of that patient also went on board the ambulance. At that point, I stepped away from the ambulance, went back to our rescue, and got fully suited up in my bunker gear, as well as air and mask. I then grabbed our 4-gas monitor, went to the front door again, and at that point, I believe the readings were somewhere in the 107 to 114 parts per million at the front door. My partner had completed his work with the ALS crew from North. He had also suited up completely. And at that point, we decided to make entry, and not only finding out what the air conditions were like, but trying to find out what the source of this was. We went through the home. It was just a small rambler with a basement. I don't remember it being a walkout, attached garage. And as upstairs readings were high again, we were in the high 100s everywhere upstairs. We made entrance downstairs, heard this noise that we had heard from up on the first floor, and found out to be a large gas generator that was in the basement. At that point, our 4-gas monitor completely, no readings were found anywhere. Pegged it.
Yeah.
We maxed out our abilities on that unit.
What's it go to? Just give me an idea.
Somewhere in the 600.
699 is
somewhere
what I
in
think,
there in that range.
Okay.
For it pegs.
So we thought, we've got a good indicator. This is our culprit. The issue was now trying to ventilate that house and get it out. I think at that time, Chief, and I get a little foggy with this part of it. I'm not sure if we, again, egressed the house. I think I provided an update to dispatch. Checked with our police officers. One was a little queasy. One was somewhat, if I remember correctly, lightheaded, also somewhat queasy. I then called for North to start a second ambulance our way to have the officers checked out, as well as I called Chief Prillaman on our ops channel and asked him to bring down our RAD-4 so that we could take an initial reading of CO in the blood of our officers that had been inside before we arrived. Chief, go ahead.
So I had been, Jeff and his crew had contacted me still out on the accident scene to update me that they had moved from a stroke call to a CO call, and that they had gotten very high readings, both in the front yard as well as after having made entry into the home. And then Jeff and the crew provided another update later that we potentially had police officers on the scene who also had been impacted by the levels of CO. Total of 3 police officers on the scene. I responded, the shift commander carries that piece of equipment, and so I responded to Jeff's scene, and we began the process of checking everybody's blood level for CO. All 3 officers, including one that never even made it into the home, who had just done a 360 for us, all 3 recorded levels of CO in their blood, and all were treated and released at the scene. And this sparked a discussion internally that has turned out to be a very positive discussion. But we're an organization that responds to about 26 or 28 calls a day. Our high runs 40 or 45 calls a day. 65, 70% of those are medicals. And our normal routine had been, we presume a medical's a medical, and it's not necessarily an IDLH. It's certainly something that comes in as a stroke or something that, this could have been virtually any other medical, right? This patient could have fallen. It could have come in as a lift assist. He could have broken a bone. It could have come in as a broken bone. And that prompted us to say we're moving too quickly into some of these, and our crews don't have the right equipment to alert them to the fact that they might be entering into an environment that could be dangerous for them.
Yeah. Hold on a second, Chief. Jeff, if you would not have smelled exhaust, would CO have been anywhere on your radar?
Not initially. No, I would think that I would definitely be going down the medical side of things. Other than with the stroke, I wasn't sure about the posturing of the patient.
But stroke patients will posture.
But they can posture,
right.
yeah. Or that blueness that I described. So I think it would have taken me, if I wouldn't have had that smell, if I wouldn't have heard whatever that mechanical piece was running, to me those were the big clues for me personally. Without that, as Chief said, I think it's just one of those, we want to go help. You're just going to dive in and go, oh, now what?
Right.
So it was an eye opener.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Continue on. So, the call wraps up, and you all realize that there's opportunity now. So, what'd you learn from this call that has led perhaps to you doing some things differently. And this is where you get to the part of the show where you get to give advice, because there are a lot of people going right in on a lot of calls.
Absolutely.
And could find themselves maybe even more disadvantaged as you were, that there would be no exhaust smell and there'd be no sound of a running motor, but nonetheless a high CO level, and the responders could become the victims with those level of CO
Easily.
pretty quick. So
I think a couple of things that we should point out is this generator that's running in the basement is running because the power to the home has been turned off, either for financial reasons or some other reason. So they've brought a generator inside. It's gas powered. They've got it in the basement. They're running the whole building, which was hidden from us. Right, the lights are on. Everything looks normal as we enter.
Right.
The second piece of this is September the 13th just happened to be one of the first cool nights, potentially one of the first nights that windows would have been closed for overnight purposes, where this generator might have been running in this home for weeks or months. We have no idea how long it was down there. And it's possible that this being the first cool evening was the first time the home got closed up.
Right.
What it prompted us to do was to take a hard look at the variety of circumstances that we are wandering into. It's certainly unreasonable to expect that every one of our medicals would be treated as if it was an IDLH and to gear up and pack up. But at the same time, we knew we needed to do more than what we were doing. And when you look at the impact of CO in particular, it seemed pretty simple and relatively inexpensive to equip the medical bag. Our process is pretty regimented, as I'm sure most of your listeners are, in that a medical gets certain standard pieces of equipment. Our first out bag goes in on all medicals. It doesn't matter the type. And so we decided that equipping the bag meant that a first responder was going nowhere without that bag, and therefore, instead of equipping 84 firefighters, we equipped 7 or 9 first out bags and made sure that the bag would alarm. We found a small, actual disposable single gas CO monitor. It's a 24-month product. It automatically wakes up and goes into sleep mode when you move it. At the end of 24 months, you throw it away. It's about $200 a piece, and we felt like that's a very small investment in giving us another level of protection, other than expecting everyone to suit up for every one of our 28, 38 calls a day.
Mm-hmm. Now, is this a product that was made for the fire service, or did you find it somewhere else and then adapted it into a fire service setting?
Well, I actually think it's a Scott product.
Oh, okay.
So there are several of them out there. We looked at some from some of the traditional fire service vendors. We looked at some from traditional industrial vendors that would have OSHA compliant. We knew that there's a lot of industry that is routinely working in environments that have at least low levels of CO, and what we were looking for is something that would be relatively low maintenance and something that didn't require us to have to remember to turn it on and turn it back off again. That was the key, is we wanted something running automatically so that we could just count on it to alarm if we got into a situation that we had detectable CO, and not run the risk of, we forgot to turn it on, which most of our fire department CO detectors, all the ones we use, require you to actually turn the device on. Mm-hmm. And so we knew that the ones we carried would not meet the objective that we set out to meet as we began to look for a supplemental one.
And it's disposable because the sensors are basically just wear out after the 2-year period?
Yeah, it's just designed that it's just not replaceable. It's a sealed unit. There's no calibration, so there's no maintenance with it. Mm-hmm. It's just designed, I think, primarily for these industrial applications where just replacing the whole thing is much more efficient method than having to calibrate, test, replace sensors, etc.
Sure. Now, did the implementation of the monitors onto the bags also come along with a policy about what to do if you come into an environment and you get a reading of a certain amount, then you do, like a low-level reading, you can be in that environment for some period of time, but if it's above a certain amount, then exit the environment. What I would imagine that you guys just didn't, knowing what I know about the Brooklyn Park Fire Department, is you didn't just take some monitors, slap them on the bags, and say, hey, if it beeps, don't go in. That you guys had some thought given to how you use the monitors.
Yeah, so similar to the way in which a crew would use universal precautions for selecting medical PPE, we haven't eliminated the judgment. In this particular case, to Jeff's credit, is although Jeff didn't know what was wrong, he realized that there was something wrong, and it was significant, and he made the choice, the right one, to pull the patient and the brother just out of the environment. In some cases, this is going to give us at least an alert that this is not your typical run-of-the-mill. Something is occupying space that we were relying on being occupied by room air, and it still allows the crews to react to it. What's this thing telling you? Where's the likely source? And we still have a mission, right? We still have a sick patient, and so what do we have to do to quickly, efficiently, and safely tend to our patient? So this has prompted a lot of internal dialogue training along the lines of, what do we do? How do we make certain that as few people as necessary go in? How do we make certain that we're in for the minimum amount of time? How do we make certain that we get that patient out as quickly as possible?
Do all of your on-duty personnel say they're on the rescue? They put their full turnout gear on the rescue. They have SCBA on the rescue.
Correct.
So at no time would you have a response crew on the scene without the ability to protect themselves and perhaps make an entry and bring a patient out of that environment. You're always going to have that.
Always, yeah.
Okay.
So
because there are places that won't necessarily, when people are assigned to the medic, they don't maybe, you're on the medic for the shift, so they don't take their turnout gear because they're always going to be on medicals. So maybe a good takeaway is, SCBA on the ambulance, because I know, many that don't necessarily do that. And
our rescue is a multi-purpose utility. It's got a small skid unit style pump in it, but all the crews always have an SCBA, and even if there's a department that's running transport or running a rescue that's not intended as a suppression unit, having an air pack and a face piece. We're uniformed. A duty uniform, and so all of our medicals generally are going to be in that duty uniform, but throwing on an SCBA and a face piece in this type of an environment certainly would have been a good first level. And had Jeff and his crew known definitively what was creating the CO or what was creating this exhaust, there wouldn't have been anything wrong with them using their judgment and using only an SCBA and face piece. The fact that it's unknown, we clearly have got something going on in this house that's uncertain, and he's going to embark upon a broader search. Getting in full PPE was absolutely the right choice that day.
Did you conduct a primary search on the thought that there might be someone else still there that the brother didn't tell you about, or?
We did go through each and every room of the home on a primary search, albeit for two reasons. One, for the primary, and number two, again, trying to see what was this, where was it coming from, and what are the levels we have. So we did do that. Initially, we didn't get, I don't remember getting, were there two people or three? We weren't sure about that. Found out again after that it was the two brothers. And their understanding was they had moved here, hadn't had the time, whether they didn't have the time or, as Chief said, we weren't sure about the financial strain, and this is all they knew was if they got that generator in, They could have light. They could do their things. They didn't take into consideration this home being sealed.
Was there any language barrier with the patient?
No.
No. Okay. Because I can imagine even more challenging if you had say a non-English speaking patient, trying to explain what happened to his brother and what how they were. Did he tell you they were using the generator did he reveal that to you?
We found this out as we were in the ambulance in the North ALS unit.
Okay.
Was that they had some type of power, and wasn't said specifically it was a generator, nor when initial thought about generator in a house, thinking a little small generator. This was quite a large unit.
We should point out.
Size.
We should point out that these were foreign-born residents, so English was spoken, but as is the case with a lot of our residents, we're now the most diverse community in the state of Minnesota, and the cultural issue is these two individuals. This probably wasn't anything at all unusual from a cultural standpoint of providing power to your home. The difference is the country from which they immigrated from doesn't have windows, doesn't have buildings that you can seal up the way you can seal up a home in the United States. So they spoke English, but because of some potential cultural barriers, they didn't understand the implication of what they were doing.
Right.
Definitely, and it was a large unit. We actually, to remove the unit, to get it up from downstairs, we actually did have to take a little trim with us on the way up. They must have assembled it in the basement is all I could come up with.
Wow. And they didn't have it vented out in any way?
No. It was just a gas.
Wow. Any idea how long it ran down there before, it turned into a problem for him? Was it a day, a week? I know you said
it's not. It's not a day. The only evidence to answer the question was dust on the unit itself. When we got the unit outside, it had been sitting there for a while. So it had either been powering the home for quite some time, and again, through a season where up until September the 13th, the windows could have been opened if they were really only using it for lighting. But it had been in the basement for a while, for certain.
Definitely.
Wow. Okay. So what advice would you give to listeners who tomorrow could find themselves in a similar circumstance? So what would you tell them to do to prevent what happened to you? This is definitely a close call because if circumstances were slightly different, the officers certainly could have been victims.
Definitely.
I don't know that they're necessarily thinking CO, even if they smell exhaust. I'm not saying that, that they're not smart folks, but I mean, they think in a policing kind of mindset or a medical kind of mindset, but not necessarily IDLH environment kind of mindset. So I think it could be easy for a police officer to find themselves in a situation. Is your police department taking any action to do anything more to protect the police officers from getting themselves into that kind of a spot? I'm just curious about that.
Well, on that point, we have had some dialogue with police leadership in terms of helping to identify a way to equip officers, or in their case, they're pretty consistent about also carrying a med bag in, at least out-equipping their med bags as well, so that we have a similar level of protection within both agencies. I think to your previous question in terms of what other organizations should consider, it strikes me, and we're in the midst of another issue here locally with having more Liberians than any other place outside of the Republic of Liberia, and the fear of Ebola in our community. It strikes us that we've encountered a series of events over the last couple of months that has us considering the sense of urgency that we have always prided ourselves in terms of getting bedside with patients, if you will, and at what cost or at what risk. And the idea that maybe it's time for a paradigm shift within the fire service and those of us providing medical coverage of taking a little better inventory before we cross the threshold into the home, the bedroom, or the room that our patient is, making certain we're getting a better and more complete history, and to use your terms, to be much more attuned in terms of situational awareness. Before entering, we have been, frankly, complacent that a medical is a medical, that a broken bone's a broken bone, that a stroke's a stroke, and that chest pain is chest pain. But there's something that might have contributed, and we stumbled into one that contributed completely, and by all accounts, should have sent 3 police officers and could have sent 2 firefighters to the hospital in addition to the 2 that were transported. So it's, what do we need to do to just take the edge off of that sense of urgency in lieu of, or by replacing it with a little stronger risk management assessment? What do we do across all of our medicals about, let's be aware of what we're doing before we cross the threshold. It's not critical that we get a blood pressure cuff on somebody within the first 30 seconds of arrival. Particularly in this case, Jeff and his crew were fortunate. There was some other sign that something was wrong that forced them out of the house. And when you look at the nature of our business, we have traditionally outfitted firefighters and medics with a duty uniform and a medical bag and presume each environment is a safe environment. We've just decided we're not going to make that assumption anymore. We're going to attach these single CO monitors since it seems to be likely that if anything is going to catch us, it'd be another one like this where we've got CO displacing oxygen, and it's a small investment to prevent a firefighter from going down.
Good. Jeff, any advice you'd give as the first in that would add to what Chief had to say?
I just thinking along the Chief's lines, it's like, number one, we talk about our business. We're there to help. We want to help people. But again, if we don't get there safely, if we don't conduct ourselves when we get to a scene safely, take that extra second, maybe a minute, gain your surroundings, understand, try to get a better understanding of what's going on. And then I think there's opportunities there, as Chief is saying. There's opportunities for us to work internally within the city with our police department. There's educational opportunities to work with our public, with cultural differences, things like that. There's so many different ways you can impact the community and yet keep us safe and let us still do our jobs to help the people that need us in their time. But I think one of the best things we've done here is Chief, again, got right on this, put the monitors on the bags, had discussions with us about our SOPs and SOGs, and has tried to instill this, just take a second. Get better at our situational awareness. Make sure, to the best of our abilities, that the scene truly is safe, as opposed to barging through the doors. It's just another medical.
Right.
Complacency is going to get you.
Right. Well, thank you to both of you for taking some time to sit down and talk with me today. I think that what happened to you is just the tip of the iceberg of the exposure that fire departments that are providing EMS could find themselves into that same spot. And in fact, I think a year or two ago, I had written an article on my website about a fire department that responded to, I might have talked with you about this, Ken, on the phone. They responded to a person down in a motel. And they arrived on the scene, and the cops were in the motel room, and the cop came out and met the ambulance and said, "You've got 2 people down in the motel room, and neither are breathing. CPR is in progress." So what they're thinking is like murder-suicide kind of thing. And the EMS folks go into the room, and there are 2 people down. The cop's doing CPR on them. The cop all of a sudden is not feeling so well. The medical crew is dealing with the patient. The medical crew's starting to not feel so well. The medical crew, they get the patients out, and then they call for an engine. The engine brings the monitor, and the CO level was through the roof. These two people, they died as exposure to CO. And here it was the pool heater. And in some states, unbeknownst to me, one who travels a lot, in some states, it is not law for motels to have carbon monoxide monitoring because it's such a low frequency of occurrence of carbon monoxide in hotels that it's, in some states it's not required. I know there's a push to make it required, but these two people had the room that was adjoining to the pool heater, which had a bird's nest in the, who knew, in the exhaust, and it
Just backing up.
yeah. The housekeeping is the one that came in, found them both unconscious, unresponsive. But the fire department, first responder medical went in, the ambulance folks went in, the cops were there first, doing CPR. They all got sick. They all, I don't remember how many people they transported on that one. So I think what happened to you guys is not at all an anomaly. I think there is the potential of having that happen. Maybe the generator as the source might be a little anomalous.
Sure.
But certainly not the potential of coming into a high CO environment and the patient not knowing why, and us not knowing why that patient is down. Yeah.
Well, we agree. We our first step was to accept and recognize it. We could have this happen to us again the very next call. It would be just because of what our norm had been. And so we appreciate your interest in this, and hopefully there's others out there that are listening that'll take a moment to just consider how quickly they're entering into environments and whether or not this could happen to them as well.
Good. And in the show notes, I'll put some contact information for the fire department. So if somebody wants to follow back with you and ask you a question, or maybe if you have an SOP for CO response, somebody might be interested in taking a look at that, or learning a bit more about maybe how you chose the monitor you chose versus some other one. Why did you choose that one? So there might be an opportunity there for someone to contact you with a question or two, and I'll put how to contact you in the show notes. So thanks again to both of you for being with me today. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, Chief Prillaman, for participating in this interview and sharing your lessons learned with our listeners and our viewers. Since 2007, the SA Matters instructors have helped more than 1,200 organizations and more than 67,000 individuals improve high-risk decision-making, including first responders, industrial workers, military personnel, business leaders, medical professionals, utility workers, highway workers, school bus drivers, aviation workers, oil refinery operators, and more. If you work in a high-risk, high-consequence decision-making environment, we're here to help improve your safety and your survival. And I want to help you accomplish the most important mission of all, and that's to go home to the ones who love us.
Welcome to Chief Miller. Chief Miller operates the largest social media page dedicated to the men and women of the fire service from around the world. Check him out on Instagram at Chief_Miller. Find him on Twitter at Chief_Miller. And check out the website where you can find Chief Miller Apparel at chiefmillerapparel.com.
I would like to take a moment to honor and thank the companies, organizations, agencies, and associations that have hosted situational awareness training for their team members. The Portsmouth Naval Shipyard in Kittery, Maine. The Minnesota Fire Chiefs Association Conference in St. Paul, Minnesota. The Association of Canadian Ergonomists Conference in Sudbury, Ontario. The Loudoun County Fire Officers Seminar in Loudoun County, Virginia. The Clearwater Regional Fire Service in Rocky Mountain House, Alberta. And the Anderson County Fire Department in Anderson County, South Carolina. The University Heights Fire Department in University Heights, Ohio. And the International Association of Fire Chiefs Volunteer and Combination Officers Section Symposium in the Sun in Clearwater Beach, Florida.
I think Rich's ability to connect with any crowd, that's a gift that he has, and it's easily transferable.
This is the second or third time that I've heard him speak. There's some teeth to the information that he brings.
It's been really good. Good mixes. He knows when to throw in a joke here and there to get you back involved.
Some tools. I'm a new lieutenant, so very, very interesting. And some of these things I can take back to the station and use with some of the new firefighters I have on my crew.
Something to get you thinking about your job more, big picture type stuff. I've seen them before. A good review for sure.
I have heard him before, yes. After he speaks, there's usually an enlightenment because now they're more aware of what's going on around them and what they're experiencing as they respond to calls.
He's very, very knowledgeable. I'm enjoying it so far.
And that intuition, that's a big one. The video that you just showed up here, we're getting a lot out of this. I think this is a really good seminar, especially for new people and old. I think it's very informative. This talk gives us more ammunition to do all three.
They're relatable to what we have experienced or very well could experience, so he makes it easy to let the knowledge sink in.
I mean, it's awesome. A lot of stories you can usually relate to yourself and calls you have been on, aha moment. Like, he just helps you focus on picking out the right things. It's awesome. It's a refresher and keeps my eyes open. It's good stuff.
If people listen to the message that he has, it's an incredible message delivered by a very compassionate person. Strategy and tactics are going to always change. Situational awareness it doesn't change. It's always there.
He's got some good stories to tell, and he's very thorough with his stories, and it's interesting listening to him.
Very clear speaker, and he talks on our level because he's been there, he's been in the trenches. I think he's doing well, and I'm looking forward to the second half.
If you're interested in attending one of our programs, here's what we got coming up. Tomorrow I will be doing a program that is being sponsored by the Rogue Interagency Training Association in Medford, Oregon. On November 19th, the Shoreline Fire Department in Shoreline, Washington. November 24th through December 11, I will be at the Syncrude Oil Refinery in Fort McMurray, Alberta. To see the locations of all the upcoming events, just go over to the SA Matters website and click on the blue box on the right side of the homepage labeled Live Training Dates. If you're interested in hosting a program, just click on the Contact Us tab on the top of the SA Matters page and I will give you a call. If you want to become part of the SA Matters community of learners, there's a couple of ways you can do that. Click on the show notes for how you can get connected with us through our newsletter membership, podcast subscribers, YouTube subscribers, and how to follow us on our social media channels of Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram. There we share ideas about how to improve situational awareness, how to make better decisions under stress, and how to improve the skills of critical thinking and resilient problem solving. Well, that's it. Episode 238 of the SA Matters show is complete. Thank you again to my guest, Fire Chief Ken Prillaman, for sharing your story and your lessons learned that will help others be safer. Thank you to our awesome sponsors, Midwest Fire and Chief Miller. Thank you to all the companies, agencies, and organizations that have hosted live Situational Awareness Matters training programs. Thank you to all the organizations that have hosted live virtual internet-based training events. Thank you to the more than 2,500 students and graduates of the highly acclaimed Situational Awareness Matters Online Academy. Remember, the special enrollment for the Academy, as I mentioned earlier at the start of this episode, expires on November 30. And most importantly, thank you, the listeners and viewers of this show, for sharing some of your valuable time with me today. I really appreciate your support of the SA Matters mission. Be safe out there. And may the peace of the Lord and strong situational awareness be with you always.
You've been listening to the Situational Awareness Matters radio show with Dr. Richard B. Gassaway. If you are interested in learning more about situational awareness, human factors, and decision-making under stress, visit samatters.com. If you are interested in booking Dr. Gassaway for an upcoming event, visit his personal website at richgassaway.com.